As Mark Carney is off gallivanting in Europe, making major economic deals, the Canadian real estate market is starting to have its bottom fall out. We are seeing other financial cracks in Canada, and it's starting to be reflected in the CPI reports. And those numbers just came out today, which my economic crush was lucky enough to present on Bloomberg. We're also going to talk about how that's going to affect the real estate market moving forward. But luckily, Danielle Smith calls out Ottawa and Carney directly, but the media is completely silent on it because they don't want to give her any positive coverage, but it is a strong announcement. Carney was featured on CNN where he gave some, let's say, curious answers about creative accounting, as well an answer that I think will embarrass the elbows up crowd. And the Liberal Party continues to brag about all of their non-accomplishments, and of course they keep bringing in the foreign entrepreneurs. We have a bunch of updates on those. Canadians need to learn business lessons, so let's get into it. Starting off, we have this video here going over the CPI data, and it's starting to show some of the things that we talked about in previous videos. Let's get into it.
Inflation in Canada holding steady at 1.7% year over year in May. Shelter costs cooled, especially in Ontario. Our guest says a continued slowing in core inflation will be key for the Bank of Canada to cut rates at its July meeting. Let's bring in Veronica Clark, economist at Citi. Veronica, great to see you.
Great to see you, Veronica. Great to see you.
You think broadly that the bank is likely to cut next month, cut rates again?
Yeah, it depends very heavily on this inflation data. We have one more CPI report to go before that July decision, the report for June that will come out next month. There has been a lot more focus on the stickiness that we've seen in the core inflation measures. So I do think it's maybe a necessary condition that core inflation in June data is back in that target range, below 3%. But I think it's pretty likely right now, at least my forecast is that it will be back in that target range. It does seem like some of the details, even in this May data, were a bit more favorable, that slowing in shelter inflation mainly.
Yes, the slowing in shelter inflation is going to, in my personal opinion, be a big one. And before you guys say it in the comments, yes, house prices are still up, rents are still up, but they are majorly falling from where they were at previous peaks. And because the math on CPI is done on year-over-year numbers, we're going to start to see, because they're major lagging indicators, those numbers are going to start dragging down inflation in a pretty substantial way. And we'll get into that.
We're looking at a chart now of the core interest rate and inflation, and we can really see how they missed the boat in the pandemic-inspired inflation. They took their sweet time about raising rates.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do try to be forward-looking, as a policymaker setting the policy rate, but the Bank of Canada explicitly is not being very forward-looking right now. They've told us that. Of course, there's just a lot of uncertainty around tariffs and the growth outlook.
Yeah, and that's a problem I've had with a lot of their announcements recently. Like, a lot of their announcements have been, we're taking a wait-and-see approach. I think it's pretty clear we're seeing the economy is getting worse and inflation is going to be slowing. And if we were or are to continue to slow the population growth rate, all of these numbers are going to fall. As these numbers continue to plummet, I think we're going to be too late to the party again to get the stimulation going.
They're not being as forward-looking as usual. But I think in July, when we start to get forecast updates again, as usual, hopefully, then they can go back to being more forward-looking. And it does seem like there's more downside risks, I think, to inflation this year than upside.
Not to keep stopping it and agreeing with my girl, Veronica, but, Veronica, just shoot me a message on Instagram. I can't find your profile, but we need to talk numbers, because I agree. I've seen a lot of people, even Canadian economists talking about, actually, inflation's really scary and they shouldn't be cutting at all. But personal opinion, the underlying fundamentals are bad. Like she's saying, I think the risk is on the side of disinflation more than it is on inflation. There's a difference between the two.
Tell us what's been happening with shelter costs, because mortgage rates have been falling, actually, with interest rates, mortgage costs, and rents have shown signs of coming down as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The shelter outlook looks a lot more favorable than it has for the last couple years. The way that we measure shelter inflation is a little bit different in Canada versus the U.S. But mortgage costs have been an element within shelter inflation and CPI in Canada. So those coming down, that's helped. But we have seen rents slowing, and part of that story could be softer immigration trends this year, less upward pressure on those rents. But then also very importantly, home prices have been falling.
Oh, so immigration does affect rents.
And that is a direct input into shelter inflation in certain components in CPI. And so that weakness that we've seen in housing is going to pretty quickly feed into softer shelter inflation. And I think that trend should continue based on what we've seen so far in housing data.
Yes, and we're about to get into a story that's showing the problem that developers are seeing with housing. And it's because we know as the population growth, demand side has slowed. And of course, the economic fundamentals of Canada continue to get weaker. People are not able to buy houses at the prices that they were able to. That's going to affect the shelter costs. So right now, housing in Canada is more affordable than it was in the last 2 years because the rates have gone down and house prices are falling. We're seeing in some markets, stuff is just not selling at all. People are taking it off the market, or it's selling for much lower than what it would have sold for in 2022, 2023. And right now, the developers are asking for more government help. I don't think they should be doing that. And even as somebody who's directly impacted by falling real estate prices, we don't need to cover for these guys. Let's get into this story.
It's the latest warning from the home building industry about an impending cliff for construction.
We're seeing sales have stopped.
The industry says even as interest rates, the cost of materials, and municipal taxes have decreased, buyers still aren't biting. And no sales means no shovels in the ground.
There's projects being completed now, but once those projects get completed in 26 and 27, there is going to be a real lack of jobs, lack of investment, lack of a new activity, and lack of delivery of new homes in 28 and 29.
Despite the Ford government's new law aimed at helping home builders free up cash and fast-track projects,
they keep showing all those like condo towers that just nobody's interested in anymore and are being completed at record levels that were being completed, being prepared for mass immigration to be, carrying the load on those.
The industry is still calling for more help, asking for provincial and federal tax breaks to lower construction costs.
Those taxes are not paid by our industry. They're passed through to the consumer. And I think the consumer is currently voting with their pocketbook that regardless of the changes in market forces, regardless of some of the adjustments in taxes, price points are still too high. We cannot possibly deliver homes for the price that people are willing to pay.
But provincial officials told Global News any kind of tax holiday isn't under consideration, and tax breaks.
Personally, lower taxes, I'm always going to be on board, but I agree, that's not the problem here.
Would be aimed at buyers rather than builders. What the Ford government is looking at is how to work with Ottawa. The federal government has pledged to tap unused public lands to build affordable housing.
We have a lot of surplus land in Ontario, and I think in Ontario alone, over 200 sites. Not all could be available for housing, but let's repurpose that land where we can. Let's repurpose it so we can get affordable housing starts, work with non-for-profits. Let's work for new home buyers. Let's find homes for the missing middle.
The funny part is he's kind of missing the point of what the developers are saying. The developers are saying, hey, look, we're seeing the demand side is falling. People are not willing to buy right now. And this guy's going, oh, well, if they're not willing to buy, why don't we just build more? And they're going, hey, we're not going to be able to have any more builds because people won't be buying. So they're kind of sending out conflicting messages. But realistically, what the underlying principle is, hey, if the demand is going to continue to fall, then prices will have to adjust with natural market forces, and we don't need to continue to free up all of this land, especially as population growth is slowing. We can allow these projects to be built. Hopefully, as rates come down and market prices adjust naturally, then we're going to end up with a more affordable market for Canadians. But speaking of prices and spending, we have this quick little announcement. They brought on an expert to talk about Carney's new defense spending announcements, and it's not looking good.
At the Canadian Global Affairs Institute and a retired official at the Department of National Defence. Andrew, good to see you as always. Thanks for your time.
Good afternoon, Todd.
What's at stake here for Canada at this NATO summit? You know, the Prime Minister just made a big announcement a couple of weeks back about Canada finally getting to 2%. But as I mentioned a little earlier, you know, the goalposts are now about to change. Now we're going to be looking at 3.5%. What position does that put Canada in?
Well, it's always a tough one. We haven't had the guns versus butter debate in Canada yet. We've said, sure, we'll go to 2%. There's a lot of support for that. But in the fall, we're going to have to find out where in Canada this money's coming from.
And that's the $1 million question.
Carney has said he's not going to raise taxes, so that one's gone. There's two other options. One, pass the hat around the federal government so other departments give the Defense Department money and we meet it that way. Or the other thing is you simply borrow.
And to be honest, let's just say there's some federal departments that we could be slashing and put that money towards defense spending.
And we'll see where that goes. So
But yes, sorry, not to brush over what he was saying. You're going to talk about borrowing it. You want to talk about increasing spending, which is going to increase Canada's sovereign debt crisis so that we can make up all of this defense spending that needs to happen. Now, if Canada wants that to happen, we are going to need to find economically viable nation-building projects that we could potentially get into a sovereign wealth fund, or at the very least, use for some of this spending, because we're going to get into what the creative accounting that Carney wants to use some of this spending for, and maybe he's in alignment with that, but Danielle Smith's calling him out because he's obviously not putting his money where his mouth is. We luckily have some legacy conservatives. This is Stockwell Day himself. Have you liked the video yet? It's a way to get these videos in front of more people. We help grow the channel. Don't forget to sign up for Wealthsimple. The link is down below. You get $25. I get $25. Let's take on the big banks. Let's get back to it. In Canadian history, no PM has so radically and swiftly shifted the sovereign priorities of Canadians to Europe without debate or mandate, aligning us with economic and social policies that are crushing the EU. That's the funny thing. Why would we attach ourselves and try to emulate an area that is not doing well economically? They're running into their own debt problems right now, but sure, let's emulate them while declaring shared values with China. And so it's funny to see the legacy conservatives like him call it out when you have the dweeb conservatives like Aaron O'Toole championing these moves. Okay, first of all, this is why it's been so hard to cheer for the modern conservatives. Like, yes, would I have preferred they had won over the liberals? Sure. But when you have guys like Aaron O'Toole saying, this is very positive, it's certainly not a substitute for NATO in any way, but the more work we do with allies in Europe is key for economic security. The Prime Minister must also swiftly fix procurement and help defense industry scale up to ensure that we're true partners and beneficiaries from Rearm Europe. Shut up. Shut up, Aaron O'Toole. Get out of here. The guy is such a loser. He's been a liberal. That's why his run as party head was so short, because everybody's like, who the hell is this guy? Get him out of here. But luckily, the Liberal Party has put out this tweet thread, and I'm sure Aaron O'Toole was just excited about this thread, dunking on all of the things they've been able to pull off. Our Liberal team earned a strong mandate to build big, build bold, and build now. Okay, and what did they do? They took summer vacation while wanting to build big, build bold, and build now. And they wasted no time getting to work, except for the 12-week summer vacation. Unlocking our country's full potential with the One Canadian Economy Act, a crucial step towards breaking down international trade barriers, speeding up nation-building projects, and creating good-paying jobs. Okay, technically, it did get passed. However, we just covered in last video, there's no one coming to the table because you guys still want to control everything. You have an insane climate agenda that no private companies are going to want to get involved with. Kind of a useless victory there. Cutting taxes for the middle class to put more money in your pocket. Oh yeah, $90 for the average person. So thankful the Liberal Party's bragging about that. Securing Canada's borders and sovereignty, including reinvesting, rearming, and rebuilding the Canadian Armed Forces. Yeah, our sovereignty is so funny because it's like we're just going to co-sign on a bunch of credit cards with Europe and start tying all of our future to them because we're so sovereign. We're going to bring in the king of a foreign nation and then get connected with the EU. Eliminating GST on homes up to $1 million, saving first-time homebuyers up to $50,000. First of all, its tax is gone. I'm on board. Second of all, we know it doesn't help with the affordability problem. It's all on the demand side. Standing up for Canadian workers and expanding trade opportunities with our partners and building a new economic and security relationship between Canada and the US. We don't have a relationship with them right now. You guys have not been able to secure a deal. So if by new relationship you mean we keep running away to Europe, a nation that we're not connected to when we share the largest land border in the entire world with the United States of America? Okay, sorry, getting a little heated. We're going to calm down. Introducing the Canadian Strong Pass. This is the funniest thing. This is the federal government talking about how they are helping Canadians by introducing the Canadian Strong Pass from June 20th to September 20th. So just for a few months, they're going to help families discover and enjoy more of Canadians' national parks, historic sites, and marine conservation areas over the summer. So yes, you can't feed your kids. You just got laid off. And you can't get a new job because the economy is floundering. But don't worry, we're going to make sure you can go to the park. This is why we need the nation building projects. We're going to have to lean on Alberta for a lot of this, which made me concerned when I saw this announcement that came out of Alberta. Let's look at this.
Has won 2 of the 3 by-elections in this province. Party leader Naheed Nenshi now has a seat in the legislature.
I would like to introduce to you the MLA for Edmonton Strathcona, our leader, Naheed Nenshi.
Nenshi handily winning his seat, pulling in more than 80% of the vote in Edmonton Strathcona, according to unofficial results. The NDP also won in Edmonton Ellerslie.
Okay, come on, guys. We cannot be voting in Indian communists to Edmonton. Edmonton, I'm very disappointed in you. 80% of the vote. But luckily, Danielle Smith came out with this really strong announcement. She's calling out Mark Carney and Ottawa directly. And this is the hope we have for Alberta, even though that last announcement was a real shock, because I don't know how you guys are voting for that guy.
Alberta, our home. Pristine mountains and lakes, wide open pastures and fertile fields, unmatched natural resources, world-class cities, world-class people. Alberta truly has it all. We are a strong and free people, full of entrepreneurs, food producers, builders.
We love bringing in entrepreneurs.
Caregivers, teachers, and a whole lot of hardworking, tough as nails, get-her-done grit. Our potential is as limitless as our skies. But let's face it, Alberta's being held back. Our economy has been under attack for most of the last 10 years. Frankly, off and on for decades long before then. Not by a foreign country or by world economic forces. No, Alberta's biggest threat to our prosperity and growth has come from our own nation's capital. Alberta has an Ottawa problem.
Whoa, Alberta has an Ottawa problem, and it's pretty clear because Carney keeps saying they're going to do one thing and then doing another, which actually, the CNN interview we're going to show clips from, it's conflicting messages.
For the last 10 years, Ottawa, led by successive Liberal governments propped up by their NDP allies, have taken direct aim at Alberta's core industries. Ottawa's Bill C-69 killed several major Alberta pipeline and resource projects. Their West Coast tanker ban specifically blocks Alberta oil from accessing world markets. Their excessive industrial carbon taxes and the new oil and gas emissions cap are designed to keep our world-class oil and gas reserves in the ground. And net zero mandates on everything from electricity to vehicles are causing the cost of living to increase, business costs to soar, and are even endangering the stability of our power grid in the dead of winter. And the effects on Alberta's economy have been staggering. In just the last 10 years alone, more than $500 billion, that's $500 billion, in global investment capital destined for our resource sector has disappeared.
Why would we care about global investment worth $500 billion coming to Alberta when Mark Carney and his team can just print unlimited money against zero production? And that's free money. That's the infinite money glitch.
It walked away from Alberta and Canada and instead headed off to Texas, Asia, and the Middle East, to places that welcome resource development and jobs. That cost Alberta and Canada quite literally hundreds of billions in GDP, corporate taxes and resource royalties for healthcare, education, and public infrastructure.
That's the insane thing. Like, these are missed tax revenues that we could be building a sovereign wealth fund with.
It cost hundreds of thousands of jobs and thousands of healthy and growing businesses. It was national self-harm on a level never seen. And no province was hurt more than ours. And those costs keep building every single day. But we're not just losing investment, we're losing trust. As I said, this story is bigger than just the last decade. Alberta has been treated unfairly for decades long before that. We've built roads, rail, power, jobs, and prosperity for this country. Yet we've been told to keep quiet and be grateful while sending $20 billion a year more to Ottawa than we receive back in funding each year.
And yet all of the other provinces who benefit from that just keep telling Alberta to shut up and kick rocks. And then Alberta goes like, okay, fine, we'll leave. No, you can't leave, you traitors.
In fact, since 1980, Alberta has contributed $653 billion more to federal taxes than we receive back. That means well over $500 billion went directly from Alberta to fund other provinces, mostly with economies larger than ours, through programs, transfers, and equalization. And despite this, we have continued to be the economic engine and job-creating juggernaut of this country, and have opened our province to those from every corner of Canada looking for work and opportunity.
Yep, people go out to the rig all the time. Fort Mac, she's a cruel mistress.
And when we point out these facts, how do Ottawa politicians and Eastern elites respond? Our concerns are dismissed, our values marginalized, our leaders vilified, and our industries remain targeted. Most Albertans are or want to be proud Canadians. We've fought for this country, fed this country, and powered this country. But the status quo relationship with Canada cannot continue.
Yes, I think that's clearly the biggest issue. We know there has to be change. So that's why when we see things like this out of Mark Carney on CNN, it's so funny that the mount up, elbows up people got played for like a fool while they were trying to basically attack Alberta the whole time, when Mark Carney gives answers like this.
Tends to be A, transactional, and B, very personal. And sometimes he thinks, or maybe you know differently. Apparently they say honestly, that you're the Trump whisperer.
They say that you're the Trump whisperer.
Of the leaders.
I'm not
and
sure
that you're on texting, relations with him and you're constantly talking.
You're on texting relations with Trump and you're constantly talking. Interesting.
So is he still saying he wants to annex Canada?
He's not. He's not. He admires Canada, I think it's fair to say, and maybe for a period of time coveted Canada. But
you've put that to bed.
Well, look, we're two sovereign nations who are discussing the future.
Are we a sovereign nation?
Our trade relationships, our defense partnership, which has been very strong in the past. How is that going to evolve? But again, this
was supposed to be the guy taking on Trump. Literally all of the rhetoric was combative. Elbows up, crowd. You got played like fools. You guys are absolute nerds. I don't care because I want Canada and the U.S. to work together. But I do care that Carney keeps making the wrong announcements, making all these relationships with Europe. But he does talk about his creative accounting right here. So let's get into this.
Actually, you're at 2%, but now they want 3.5% and eventually 5%. Isn't that just going to cripple your budgets?
It's important. These are important.
I love how he doesn't care about crippling the budgets, but CNN does.
Questions, and it's important to be clear what we are potentially, and I think likely to all agree tomorrow, which is, and let's take the 5% of GDP figure, which is a huge chunk. Big number.
How much is it actually for you?
5% of our GDP would be about $150 billion.
I mean, that's a lot.
It's a lot of numbers.
Per year?
Per year.
That's a lot.
Of course it's...
Just a quick little 150 billion, 5% of our GDP. Yeah, we don't have any projects to make up for that, but we're going to spend it.
So it means that's stuff that you can't give to your own citizens.
Well, okay, but let's start.
I love that she calls that out. That's stuff that you can't give to your own citizens, and he's just like, whoa, come on. We don't need to talk about that.
Let's start to break it down. So part of it, a little less than a third of that overall number is spending on things that, quite frankly, we're already doing to build the resilience of our economy. So it can be domestic resilience. It can be defending in areas that support defense, but also support other things. So I'll give an example. Critical minerals. It is obvious, I think, to everyone now, the risk that's run being fully dependent on China for critical minerals, including rare earths, magnets, and others, not just for defense industry, but for the auto industry and others.
Not discounting the fact that we have the ethical duty to be producing the critical minerals in Canada. It's funny because he's now saying we're going to take our defense spending, we're going to creatively use the accounting so that it can pay for us to focus on critical mineral production, which means in theory that would be spending money on those projects. But because of their obsession with being climate zealots, those projects seem to not being moved forward.
Canada has one of the biggest and most varied deposits of critical minerals,
which Trump was coveting.
We are going to develop those. We're going to develop those in Canadian interests. We're going to develop some of them in partnership with the European Union itself and European Union member states, with the UK, other partners.
So, the U.S., largest economy in the world, wanted to develop a relationship with us around the critical minerals production, and instead we're going to develop it with the EU.
Some of the spending for that counts towards that 5%. In fact, a lot of it will count towards that 5% because it's infrastructure spending, it's ports and railroads and other ways to get these minerals out. So that's something that benefits the Canadian economy, but is also part of our NATO, our new NATO responsibilities.
Now, breaking down what he said there is actually pretty funny, because not only is he talking about increasing government spending, which I wouldn't have a problem with if it was going directly to nation building projects, but he's basically now admitting, okay, yeah, we're going to increase our defense spending, but we're not actually going to spend on our defense, which is funny that he's really rigging the game there. He needs to learn from the entrepreneurs we've been importing. Speaking of, let's get into some of that information, shall we? Because we got this post from Ben Rabido. Reminder, the surge in temporary residence in Canada in recent years has skewed heavily towards young men. Now, nearly 300,000 more men than women in the 20 to 29 age bracket. That is just a single decade that now has an outlier of 300K. What's that going to do when you have 300,000 men in their 20s who have no women to pair up with? Surely that won't have any negative effects at all. It's not destroying local bar scenes as these guys are out there hounding women currently. The solution, he says, is not to loosen eligibility for women, but to tighten PR pathways for the mostly men that are already here. But we do have to be prepared. If we keep kicking people out, we're going to have to lose entrepreneurs like this. 23 million fun powder bust at the Blue Water Bridge. What does that mean? Commercial truck arrived from the United States at the Blue Water Bridge port of entry and was referred for a secondary examination. During the inspection of the trailer, Border Services officers, with the assistance of a detector dog, discovered 161 bricks of suspected fun powder contained in 6 boxes, according to the CBSA. The total weight of the suspected substance was 187 kg, with an estimated street value of 23.3 million. Now, who was this impressive entrepreneur who they stopped from doing business? The CBSA arrested Karamveer Singh, 27, of Brampton, Ontario. I really hope he doesn't lose his temporary status. Singh has been charged by the RCMP with an importation of fun powder and possession of fun powder for the purposes of trafficking. Very cool. This is why I continue to be impressed by the quality of entrepreneurs we keep bringing into the country, so I hope we keep it up. But anyways, if you made it this far in the video, you absolutely rock. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Helps get these videos in front of more people. Don't forget to sign up for Wealth Simple. The link is down below. You get paid $25. I get paid $25. You support the channel, and we're taking on the big banks. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.